Hey everyone, glad everybody back at home could tune in. I know that there's been a lot of words and speculation, and I've been approached by many different people via cell phone about what has taken place today, and it seems like everything seems to be a little bit different here and there. We have Jeffrey Larson with us, who's going to introduce himself. I have David Covey sitting right next to me as well, and we're going to discuss and just kind of go through the list of all of what took place with Jeffrey. So, Jeffrey, if you don't mind, this is Jeffrey. Introduce yourself and what you do here at the convention.
Well, I'm Jeff Larson from Harris County, and I'm very active in a lot of different Republican organizations at everything from national level on down to my precinct level. And what I do when I come to RNC meetings and the big conventions like this is basically I try to push the agenda of openness, transparency, empowering delegates, things of that nature. That's what gets me going. And when those things happen, then I feel like people get a voice within their party, and the party becomes healthier as a whole. There's less of a disconnect between the leadership and the grassroots.
Okay, great. So today, with everything that took place today, can you walk us through what all took place?
Just today?
Today. Well, you know what? Actually, yeah, go ahead and go into detail. Since you've been here, what are some of the highlights that you've seen?
Well, I got here Saturday a week ago. So I've been here, 8 days already, 9 days, something like that. And the first real thing from my perspective that happened was we tried to get access to the Committee on Contests. They were holding meetings, and they shut us out. We weren't too surprised on that. The Committee on Contests is an RNC committee. It's not a convention committee. And the way it's structured, according to the RNC rules, if you have a delegate contest, it first has to go to this RNC committee, and they hear it, and then they compile a report on it, and then they pass that on to the credentials committee, and then if the delegate wants to appeal the judgment of the Committee on Contests, then it goes to the credentials committee and they hear it. So we tried to get into those, didn't have much luck. We heard how they went. Some of them sounded pretty good resolutions, and others sounded pretty bad to us, but yeah. That's the way it always goes. After that, the next big thing up was platform. We did that. We also went to the RNC meeting. There's a full meeting of the RNC that took place last week in parallel with all the preparations of the convention and all the convention committees. So they had their own rules committee, their own resolutions committee, and they had their own general session, and all that took place last week. And we attended all those, and I blogged a lot of those. And then after that, we, platform finished up, and then we had rules. Rules was a mess.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah, rules, there was 2 days allotted to rules, and there was a very deliberate tactic by the pro-Trump faction, which was also aligned with the RNC. Let me give you, the point is there's about 112 members on that convention rules committee. 40 of those 112 members were also RNC members, so it was really driven by the RNC, and it voted the way they wanted to. And their tactics specifically, they were scheduled to meet over 2 days, and they deliberately, the chair from Utah, the lady from Utah, deliberately delayed all business. Even though we gavelled in at 8 o'clock, we started recessing until 1 o'clock. So nothing got done for like 5 hours. Right. And then once we started, the idea was there's really 3 sections to the RNC rules, and we go through maybe 1 or 2 sections today and finish up tomorrow. We got to the end of the second section around 6 o'clock at night, and there was a motion from the floor, and this was deliberate power play, to finish the 3rd section, and instead of meeting tomorrow. And so the committee kept going until like 11:30 at night, and that was very deliberate. And one of the individuals who went along with that effort admitted fully in her blog that, yeah, we did that on purpose. Our whole idea was to completely wear down and demoralize anybody who opposed our things.
And when you say her, you're referencing?
Diana Orrick from Nevada.
Diana, okay.
She's a good friend of mine. Right. She's on the RNC, and I really like the things she usually does. But she was a Trump supporter early, and my personal opinion, I love her to death, but I think she got a little blinded by her support for Trump in this. That's just my take on it.
Yeah.
So what happened is they also adopted a policy of voting down everything that wasn't on their list.
Right.
So if somebody proposed something that had absolutely nothing to do with this unbinding delegates or pro-Trump or anti-Trump stuff, it still got voted down just to demoralize people and weaken them. And it was very effective. By the end of the meeting, some of the things I saw in that meeting were votes were going like 80-something to 12. And you need 28 for a minority report, so I mean that kind of squashes any chance of a minority report. The other thing I saw, they would deliberately let the debate go and go and go and go and go on issues like closing the primaries, which is worth talking about. And then they just flattened it. Nope, we're going to vote that down. And really crushed the spirit of anybody who was trying to push through that unbinding delegates agenda, and that was very deliberate.
Right.
And then they adopted a tactic late in the meeting, a parliamentary trick. One of the pro-Trump supporters asked, if we reconsider a motion and the reconsideration fails, does that end any possibility of any debate on that particular subject? And the chair said yes. So what would happen is they would get their way on an issue, like say it was, let's unbind the delegates, and it's 12 yeas and 80 nays. One of the 80 nays would immediately say, I move to reconsider. And then there would immediately be 12 yeas and 80 nays, and that would just shut everything down. And they started doing that for every subject that came up in a row, whether it had something to do with unbinding delegates or whether it had to do with, like, again, open primaries, closed primaries, everything.
Okay.
So at the end of the night, it was pretty much, in my concept of the way a rules committee is supposed to work, it was a travesty. I really can't say I approve or support that whole method of tactics. If I would have been on the floor, I would have stood up and said, this is improper, we shouldn't be meeting this late. Right. As a matter of fact, one delegate got up, and unfortunately, the way he came across, he basically whined that he wasn't able, he had to travel, block out his schedule for the next day and miss his son's softball game, even though the Rules Committee wasn't going to do any business. He came across as whiny, but it was really a legitimate objection because his time was being wasted deliberately.
Okay. That makes sense. Fair enough.
So that's what happened in Rules. And then in credentials, there were 5 credentials challenges that the Committee on Contests heard. Only 2 of them were appealed to the Credentials Committee. The first one, I think, is the one that would probably interest most people. It was had to do with the Colorado State Convention. And I have to say, just from the testimony on both sides and what the party admitted it did, had to be one of the worst run conventions I've ever heard of in my life. They are supposed to, they have a system where all the potential delegates, anyone who wants to run to be a delegate, gets their name on a ballot. It's a huge ballot. It has like 200 names on it, and you vote for the 26 that you want. And that's how they pick their delegation. The whole delegation, there's like 4,000 in their delegation, picks the 26 to go on to national. Well, instead of the usual system where you have a ballot with all these names on it, you just fill in the circle by each one, they made a lot of excuses and mishandled it, and essentially they did it by numbers. And everyone was assigned a number, and so you had this booklet of candidates, and you would open it up and say, Joe Smith is candidate number 118, and Mary Smith is candidate 131, and you had to figure it out that way.
Right.
And then you're just handed a sheet that had a bunch of numbers, and you had to fill out the numbers. Well, the problem was, a lot of the candidates weren't assigned numbers until the convention. Other candidates were able to find out their numbers, and so you had people showing up that had t-shirts printed, vote for Joe Smith, number 138, and other people showing up and going, what's my number? What's my number? and literally one candidate ended up writing her number on her forehead and going around and talking to people.
That's a way.
Yeah, and so naturally some of the candidates that came kind of close but not that close, especially if they were in that second category, were pretty upset and they challenged. And the resolution of that, there was no way to resolve that properly.
Yeah.
And what they ended up doing was just simply issuing guest passes to the ones that challenged it. The other credentials hearing had to do with a lady in D.C. whose residency was disputed, and the Committee on Contests, which is the RNC committee, ruled that she hadn't received due process, and on those grounds, it didn't matter where she lived.
Right.
Since they didn't give her due process, and she was registered to vote in D.C., she was in the delegation. And then the Committee on Credentials essentially questioned her residency for a couple hours, and finally decided that they were going to strip her of her delegation. So they went against the RNC, which was kind of unusual.
It is. Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible.
So that's what sets this up.
Yeah.
And then you come into today. One of the things the Rules Committee did is the very first resolution they passed was a resolution that stated we will have a full debate on all rules items in the temporary committee, and we will assemble a complete rules package, and then we will only take one vote in permanent committee, and that will be to either approve the entire rules package or to reject the entire rules package. So basically they could walk in and do their business in 10 minutes. But you can't do that because, a temporary committee can't bind a permanent one, but everyone acted as if it would. So that's exactly what happened today. They spent more time walking into the room and walking out of the room than they did discussing the rules. Again, since you had the Rules Committee packed with pro-Trump people who already arranged the rules the way they wanted,
the better off they'd be. Okay.
So it was rubber stamp, rubber stamp, rubber stamp. In the Credentials Committee today, another thing, they didn't allow anybody to observe any of these two committees. We could, all week long, we could get into the temporary committees and sit in the back and observe, and during breaks we could talk to the committee members. Today, in the permanent committees, nope, if you weren't a committee member, if you didn't have the committee member delegate badge, you could not get into the room physically. That's the way the rules went, and that's the way the credentials went. Credentials, between the time the temporary credentials committee adjourned and today, I learned of one poor lady from Arizona who was in her delegation, and there's a cutoff on all this stuff, right? Because if you just file your appeal too late, you're out of luck. Yeah. Okay, so for that reason, there was rules that say like 35 days before the convention, the chairman has to have his list of delegates ready and submitted, and they did. And 30 days before the convention meets, you have to. That's the deadline to file your protest. If you don't get that in, there's no recourse. Yeah. And otherwise, from that 35 days on, if you're, the only 3 ways you can be removed from a delegation's list are if you die, if the Credentials Committee removes you, or if you resign your delegate spot. Those are the only 3 ways you can be pulled off. So last Sunday, which you'll recall would be about 8 days before the convention gavelled in, this lady wrote her state chairman an email and basically said that she had been forced to sign a pledge to become a delegate, and she'd reviewed the state rules, state law, and RNC rules, and there was nothing requiring her to sign a pledge. So she said, as far as I'm concerned, that particular piece of paper is null and void, and that was her email. And he wrote back and said, well, I consider your email to be a resignation. We have other delegates who can play by the rules, so goodbye. And she wrote back that same day and said, that was not a resignation. I intend to be there, and I did not resign my post. Let me be there. And I guess he conspired to take her off the list of delegates, and he sent what was an amended list of delegates, and his explanation was that she had resigned her spot. So we tried to bring that before the permanent committee today. We contacted several committee members before the meeting because we couldn't be there, and we were waiting outside the room. We couldn't get into the room. We were waiting outside the room in case they wanted to hear her testify, and it was the same story. Oh, but we already set the role. She would have had to come to us last week, and then we could have done something for her. Well, she couldn't come to him last week because she didn't know for a fact that she'd been taken off the list. Yeah. And again, a temporary committee can't bind a permanent committee, but they pretended that it could, and so she's out of luck. Fortunately, we were able to get her a guest credential, and she's sitting upstairs now. So that's what's going on so far today.
Oh, man. Well, anything lined up for tomorrow that we can talk about? More fun?
Well, the convention business will be completed today.
That's what I figured.
So tomorrow it is all just speeches and nomination, and then as the convention goes on, we'll have the balloon drop. But it's all just one big party and a lot of speeches and a rah-rah cheerleader shake the pom-pom stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Well, fair enough. I do thank you for your time. I know Tanya. I see her posting on here Thank you as well. Guys, this is Jeffrey Larson. Again, he's been up here for the last 8 days doing a lot of work. Jeff, we really do appreciate it, man.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah. Guys on Facebook, if you can, give it a share.